On a starry night, the great Bohemian magic tower stood tall. From within, strange sounds echoed, labored breaths, screams, and the chilling voice of the tower master who mocked the subject, telling him to hold on as another stimulant was injected. The screams grew louder. The master measured the result: 461 seconds of resistance. He remarked that a talented subject truly produced different outcomes. Weller, his assistant, noted the activation of the magic circle and suppression of immunization, to which the master ordered the next phase, a memory-expanding stimulant. Inside the tower, a young man named Verdan was chained and brutalized. Once filled with dreams of becoming a mage, he now questioned why he was slowly dying in the strongest magic tower of the Empire. The master commanded the stimulant to manifest, and Verdan convulsed in agony, coughing blood. His chains rattled as he begged them to stop. Annoyed, the master dismissed his cries and told Weller to report the results later. As the experiment dragged on, Weller mocked Verdan, calling him talentless and arrogant for once, thinking his intelligence alone made him special. He reminded Verdan that his life force and knowledge were now being harvested in secret. Pulling at his hair, Weller sneered, noticing an experimental ant crawling nearby. He berated the subordinates for their carelessness. The researchers ridiculed Verdan further, comparing him to an insect incapable of even breaking a single chain. Yet, they admitted his lack of magical power made him a perfect subject. Thanks to him, they had achieved a rank S experiment. Weller pitied Rovelin, Verdan's friend who entered the tower with him, for being tied to someone so worthless. Lying broken and bloodied, Verdan finally snapped. He cursed them, screaming that all of this was happening because he was weak. His mind drifted back 15 years. He recalled growing up in an orphanage, clinging to the dream of becoming a mage. But at 7, the mage compatibility test branded him a failure, a growth limit. Still, he refused to give up. As a menial laborer in the tower, he secretly studied spellbooks and immersed himself in the vast library. His lack of magic was absolute, but his intelligence shone. Over time, he was recognized as a researcher. His brilliance even caught the attention of Lucard, who praised his work, astonished that such ideas could come from an ordinary researcher. Lucard even said the Tower Master himself would acknowledge such a thesis. For the first time, Verdan felt hope. Lucard was the first to truly recognize him. But that trust was shattered when Lucard stole his thesis and presented it as his own. Verdan tried to prove the truth to the master, Barlog, begging him to listen. Barlog appeared impressed, but instead of justice, his blood-red eyes betrayed a darker intent. He summoned Verdan to his lab under the moonlight. That was the moment Verdan's fate was sealed. From then, he was confined, forced to labor by day, and serve as a test subject by night. His genius was twisted, his body ravaged with drugs, his work stolen again and again, all under threats to harm those he cared for. As Weller mocked him once more, promising harsher experiments the next day, Verdan collapsed in his solitary cell. Under the moonlight, despair filled him. He remembered his childhood promise with Rovelin to become great mages together. He wondered if things would have been different if his potential had been higher. Broken, he thought of giving up. But then, from the crushed ant he saw earlier, he heard a voice. It urged him not to surrender. It told him that pain, survival, and revenge could be his rebirth, that only by enduring would he gain true power. Verdan clenched his fist, his resolve reignited. He swore it wasn't over. For 7 years, he had sharpened the blade of revenge, and now he needed only to solve the last problem holding him back. He realized that intelligence alone wasn't enough in the face of absolute power. So he resolved to break his limits, to defy the fate imposed on him. He would complete a new theory, the theory of defying heaven. And with it, he promised himself, tomorrow, I will break through my limits. Verdan declared to himself that tomorrow he would break his limits. The long-desired theory of defying heaven, a method to reconstruct his body, had finally reached completion. He accepted death as the price. All that remained was to prove it, using an artifact that would allow him to cast magic once, even if his body shattered in the process. He swore that by tomorrow evening, he would reclaim his freedom. The long night passed, and the awaited day dawned. Weller entered Verdan's cell, sneering as usual. He ordered him to clean the alchemy lab, mocking his weakness and reminding him not to slack off before the festival. Verdan quietly obeyed. While cleaning, he encountered Rovelin, who asked why he was working alone. Verdan tried to act calm, asking why she was there. Rovelin explained she came to say goodbye before leaving to study abroad in the prestigious Magic City Virente, an honor given only to the tower's most gifted talents. She offered once more that Verdan should come with her, saying he didn't deserve the scorn he suffered here. Flustered, she added almost tsundere, that she only wanted someone to talk to, nothing more. Verdan forced a smile, saying he would still be here, and promised to write her letters. But later, staring from his solitary cell window, he whispered bitterly that Rovelin had no idea of his suffering. Still, he was grateful she would remain safe, far away from the trap of his plan. Soon, the Magic Festival began, a globally celebrated holiday honoring the first Magic Tower and the revival of magic itself. On this day, most high-ranking mages left for the cities, leaving only low-ranking ones behind. It was the perfect chance. Verdan entered the treasure vault under the pretext of delivering tea. Questioned by the administrator, he claimed the Tower Master had asked him to clean. The administrator dismissed him as pathetic, but allowed entry, warning him not to damage anything. Once inside, Verdan activated an artifact to block sound. He muttered that it was finally beginning. Descending endless stairs, he reached the base chamber where a staff rested within powerful magical circles. This was the second circuit, an artificial artifact the Tower Master had poured astronomical resources into. It enabled triple casting and could temporarily awaken the wielder's dormant talent. Verdan knew he needed that staff. But to claim it, he had to dismantle the protective spell, a 7th-tier barrier created by the Tower Master himself. For 7 years, Verdan had studied this very circle. With grim determination, he began unraveling it, unleashing violent waves of energy as the ward resisted. Elsewhere, 2 guards grumbled over their misfortune, stuck at the power source while others enjoyed the festival. They comforted themselves with drinks, unaware of the storm brewing. Soon, Verdan appeared before them. They casually ordered him to fetch more alcohol, still oblivious. But Verdan had already succeeded. He struck without hesitation, unleashing a magic attack that left one guard fatally wounded. The other, shocked, demanded to know how a mere rank 1 like Verdan dared challenge them. He cast a rank 3 tidal wave, confident it would crush him. Yet Verdan retaliated with a rank 3 earth spear. The attack pierced through the spell effortlessly and drove straight into the guard's chest, killing him instantly. The dying man's last thought was disbelief. How could someone like Verdan wield such magic? Verdan coldly muttered that this was the price of wasting breath on arrogance. Both guards lay dead. At last, he stepped into the heart of the tower's power source, a massive core pulsing with energy. For the first time, he saw it up close. 7 years of suffering had led him here. He whispered that using this mana, he would initiate defying heaven. Failure might mean death, but without trying, he would never know. Magic circles flared across his body as incantations filled the chamber. He struck the staff into the ground, crying out, "Body reform, defying heaven." A colossal surge of energy erupted from the tower, so immense it shook the empire. From afar, the Tower Master sensed the disturbance. His expression hardened. Someone had trespassed into his magic tower. After the explosion, the Bohemian magic tower was reduced to rubble. From the ruins, Verdan staggered out alive. The staff in his hand crumbled into dust. He thought to himself it was powerful enough to obliterate everything, and yet he survived. That could only mean one thing: the theory of defying heaven was a success. But then, in the distance, light approached. The figure of the Tower Master, Barlog Bessius, appeared. With rage burning, he channeled his magic and cleared the dust with a single wave. He discovered traces of a teleportation circle. Barlog roared in fury, swearing that no matter who dared touch the magic tower, even the emperor or a mere child, he would find them and kill them. Far away, in a quiet forest under daylight, Verdan lay beside a stream, drenched. He asked himself where he was and what had happened. Looking into the water's reflection, he realized his appearance had changed. His brown hair had turned ashen, and his black eyes had become a sharp blue. He wondered aloud, had his body been reconstructed differently? Had something gone wrong? He remembered, just before Barlog could catch him, he had succeeded with defying heaven, activated the teleportation circle, and escaped. Now, surrounded by strange plants he had never seen in Bohemian, he realized he must have teleported across half the continent. Relief washed over him. "I'm free," he gasped. But freedom was only the beginning. He thought of Barlog. The Tower Master must be furious, but Verdan knew one explosion wasn't enough to bring down the Empire's strongest tower. The omnipotent Barlog would rebuild, and that was fine. Verdan swore he would grow stronger, return, and destroy everything Barlog had built before his very eyes. His revenge and his growth as a true mage, this would now be his sole purpose. Smiling, he whispered goodbye to the magic tower. In the jungle, a goblin with an axe lunged at him. With a swift wind cutter, Verdan sliced it apart instantly. But as he stood over the corpse, he muttered that it didn't feel any different. His hair and eye color had changed, but his mana capacity seemed the same. Perhaps something had gone wrong during reconstruction. It troubled him, and judging from the roaming goblins, he realized he was far from civilization. Soon, he spotted skid marks and a fallen crate. He wondered if someone had dropped them in a hurry. Using mana detection, he spread his energy through the forest. His senses locked onto a carriage racing desperately ahead. Inside, the merchant at the reins was terrified. He cursed his luck. Running into remnants of bandits was one thing, but being caught between them and a grinning orc was far worse. Even his attempts to bargain with the name of Baron Pythe hadn't saved him. The orc had ignored him, busy tearing into bandits instead. But fate grew crueler still. His carriage crashed. When he stumbled to his feet, he saw dozens of glowing eyes in the shadows, a pack of orcs and goblins surrounding him. Accepting his fate, he thought his end had come. Then, suddenly, an earth wall shot up around him, shielding him from the oncoming horde. The stunned merchant gasped as the ground sealed him safely inside. Verdan appeared outside, chuckling that perhaps he had left too little room for the man to breathe. The monsters turned their eyes to him with fury. Calmly, Verdan raised his hand, fire magic flaring in his palm. He muttered that he might as well clean up before the merchant suffocated. The pack roared and charged with ferocity. Verdan tightened his stance. This was his first real battle since his escape, an opportunity to test the abilities of his new body. Verdan unleashed multi-flame arrows. The spell rained down, engulfing the goblins in fire. They writhed and screamed as the flames consumed them. Furious, the orc leader commanded his subordinates to charge. But Verdan quickly conjured two circles, multi-flame arrows and whirlwind. He combined them into a deadly fusion, heat wave arrows. Crimson circles flared above the monsters and a devastating explosion followed. When the smoke cleared, the goblins were nothing but charred remains. Verdan was stunned. Even he couldn't believe his own power. Once, he wouldn't have been able to kill a single goblin. Now, none were left. But he reminded himself he needed to rescue Mabu before it was too late. Just as he rushed forward, the orc leader appeared behind him. Verdan froze in fear, realizing he had been caught off guard. But in the next moment, the scene shifted. A merchant named Conrad was bowing in gratitude. He thanked Verdan, saying he would never forget this day. Without him, he would have died. He promised to repay the debt somehow. Verdan simply told him to focus on the path, warning he might flip the carriage again. Conrad, still shaken, asked if Verdan had been in danger when the monsters attacked. Verdan thought to himself that the man talked too much. In truth, it had been dangerous. At the last moment, he had summoned Wind Cutter and decapitated the orc leader before it struck. He then questioned Conrad about thieves, wondering why they would appear in a place filled with beasts. Conrad explained it was his first time encountering them here. This forest belonged to Baron Pythe. He had connections with the Baron from childhood and believed thieves had already been eliminated from the region. That was why he dared to travel without mercenaries. But this time, luck abandoned him. Verdan silently considered his own situation. His teleportation spell had brought him here, but it seemed fate had guided him correctly into Pythe territory. Even so, he knew the Bohemian magic tower could still be searching for him. He needed to hide his identity and grow stronger. He introduced himself under a new name, Asher. He swore that the name Verdan would only be used again once he destroyed the Tower Master. At Baron Pythe's estate, Conrad was welcomed back. The Baron was shocked by his condition, but Conrad brushed it off, blaming the orcs. The Baron apologized profusely for both the thieves and beasts. But then his eyes turned to Asher. He declared that he could not stay still when the savior of his friend was before him. He invited Asher into his castle. Inside, Asher thanked him for food, clothing, and a place to rest. The Baron introduced himself as Henrod, Lord of the territory. He praised Asher for saving Conrad and even offered him a reward of 5 million elks. But more than that, he wanted to hire Asher for a special task. Asher's thoughts sharpened. He needed money for his goals, and this would give him chances to practice magic in real combat. So he asked what the job was. Henrod explained grimly. A few days ago, bodies were discovered hanging in the southern forest. They were villagers from a nearby town, which was later found destroyed. At first, they assumed it was bandits, but the evidence was strange. It was as though traces had been erased by magic. Asher immediately suspected a mage was involved. Henrod agreed, but admitted it was still speculation. He revealed the hunt would begin in 4 days. Soon, Asher was introduced to the party. Enoch, the knight commander, greeted him. He introduced his companions Harris, the black-haired knight, and Peric, the youngest. Peric shyly greeted the mage. Asher politely returned the gesture, though he silently noted this job could be far more useful than he imagined. Looking at the crowd gathered outside, Asher asked if they were part of the plan. Enoch explained they were adventurers drawn by rumors of an unusual orc. The bounty was high enough to attract even gold-rank adventurers. Asher's eyes narrowed. Gold-rank adventurers were said to rival knights, warriors capable of strengthening their weapons with energy, and some even rumored to cut mountains in half. For the Baron to need him despite such warriors meant the threat was real. Enoch asked Asher to confirm if a mage was among the bandits. Asher agreed, but questioned why they truly needed him. Enoch explained, Tier 2 mages had power similar to knights, but at long range they posed a deadly problem. If such a mage existed, knights would struggle to close the distance. Asher smirked, saying it was unfortunate, but suddenly his expression shifted. He raised his hand and declared that a magic circle lay hidden before them. He cast Dispel. The space trembled, fragments of illusion shattering apart. A colossal crimson magic circle flared into view. Enoch shouted in disbelief. How could such a thing exist inside their territory? Asher calmly explained. The first spell had been camouflage, and this was a warning circle to alert its user. He told them to stand back. With a wave of his hand, he dispelled the enormous circle as easily as brushing dust away. Enoch's eyes widened. Even as a knight commander, he was stunned. This mysterious mage called Asher had erased a magic circle once so powerful with just a flick of his hand. Explorers, adventurers belonging to guilds were once admired for their courage. They ventured into the unknown, facing monsters and death at every step. With skill came wealth and fame. But sometimes that same power twisted them. Those who could no longer control their greed abandoned their honor, raising their blades against humans. Once admired explorers, now nothing more than bandits. Among them was Varja, a dual sword wielder. Standing over a slain deer, he sneered in frustration. His men were hungry, their food exhausted after constant raids. He barked at them to hunt immediately, venting his anger that Pythe's raid party had left the region unstable, and now even orcs and goblins were pressing them. Watching from the shadows, Harris quietly informed Enoch that they had found their target. Enoch readied his men to strike, but before they could, Asher raised his hand. Calmly, he reminded them their mission was to counter enemy mages. If they acted recklessly without measuring the enemy's strength, they could be walking into disaster. Enoch hesitated, but Asher assured him there was a way. Meanwhile, inside the camp, Varja cursed his fate. He lamented the loss of his recruited men and recalled the day he was caught murdering an explorer for money. His companion, the mage Vilshan, cut him off, insisting they focus on their next move. Orcs had destroyed their forces, and Baron Pythe's anger was growing. They could not stay hidden forever. Vilshan suggested moving toward Martez, plundering villages nearby. But before their plan could unfold, an explosion ripped through the camp. Flames engulfed the surroundings, soldiers storming in with swords drawn. Vilshan gasped in horror they had been discovered. Blood spilled as the soldiers cut into the bandits, and Varja found himself face to face with Asher. Calm and precise, Asher explained that mana barriers were fragile, fast to cast, but quick to break. Worse, when shattered, the rebound struck the caster with severe backlash. Now that their strength was revealed, he would take on the mage as requested. Enoch acknowledged him, readying his knights. Varja snarled in defiance, swearing to send their heads to the Baron. But Enoch met his rage with a mocking smile, challenging him to try. Steel clashed as the two locked in battle. Meanwhile, Asher's pursuit began. He propelled himself forward using Earth Wall, chasing Vilshin through the forest. The mage realized that Asher could not fly, meaning he was likely only second circle. Relieved, Vilshin prepared to kill him before escaping. He conjured multi-ice arrows, launching a barrage, but Asher responded instantly, summoning multiple circles of fire. His multi-flame arrows intercepted the ice projectiles, colliding in a devastating explosion that scorched the land. A crater formed, smoke and embers spiraling skyward. Vilshin smirked, convinced he still had the upper hand. Against the second circle mage, he believed victory was his. He unleashed his greatest spell, third circle magic, Falling Ice. A massive glacier of ice loomed above, crashing down with apocalyptic force. Yet Asher stood unfazed. He raised towering pillars of earth, blocking the impact. And from those very pillars, he summoned deadly earth spears, shattering the colossal ice into fragments. Vilshin's eyes widened in terror. How could a second circle cast third circle magic, he stammered. Asher only smiled coldly. Take a wild guess. He raised his hand, ice particles crystallizing at his fingertips. Vilshin realized too late the man before him wielded not 2, not 3, but 4 attributes. His deception had been flawless. Before he could react, an ice spike pierced his chest, ending his life instantly. Asher looked down at his fallen foe, his expression calm but thoughtful. Today, he had learned something valuable, how to fight against mages. But far away, the world was changing. Blood splattered across the land as a monstrous red orc rampaged, slaughtering humans without mercy. 2 days before the expedition, Asher had created a medicine of his own design. Using ingredients smuggled from the magic tower, he named it the Magic Circuit Dilator. He thought to himself that he never wanted to conduct human experiments again, but thanks to it, he had managed to reach the 3rd tier. Standing over the slain mage, Asher observed the body. He planned to leave traces that made it appear as though the bandit mage had simply been defeated so he could prove his worth and gain trust. But then, his eyes fell upon the wand the mage had carried. Using appraise, Asher discovered it was a magic stone wand, one that reduced casting time and boosted the power of ice spells. He realized it would be extremely useful. Just then, Perrick rushed over, relieved to see Asher alive. Asher admitted the opponent was stronger than expected and had taken time to defeat. Perrick looked at the battlefield and confirmed that the fight must have been difficult. When asked about the bandits, Perrick explained that most had been taken care of, and their leader was still fighting Sir Enoch. Asher then inquired about the bandits' possessions. Perrick told him their lord had allowed him to take anything he desired as long as it wasn't needed for official use. Grateful, Asher accepted the wand and promised to put it to good use. Soon, Enoch approached, thanking Asher for his efforts, saying the group would have suffered far greater casualties without him. Asher humbly replied that it had been a valuable experience. But one bandit, Varja, could not accept defeat. Watching Asher alive, he muttered that Vilshin's death was impossible. Fear took over him. He refused to die in this countryside. With desperation burning, he freed himself, brandished a crimson-tinged sword, and struck down nearby soldiers. Varja roared that he would escape by killing a knight, stealing a horse, and riding away. He lunged straight at Enoch. His dagger clashed, but Enoch shocked him by throwing away his sword and grappling him barehanded. He slammed Varja to the ground. As guards rushed in, the bandit spat curses, mocking Enoch for discarding his knightly pride. Enoch coldly replied that only the living had the luxury of pride and plunged a dagger into Varja's chest, ending him on the spot. Afterward, Enoch apologized for showing such a brutal scene, assuring that he didn't normally fight like this. Asher, looking at the remaining captured bandits, questioned why they were spared. Enoch explained that some of them might be survivors from the farm town attack, and their identities would be verified at the castle before judgment. But just as they prepared to move, one of the bandits suddenly bolted. He shouted that he didn't want to die and fled into the night. Harris readied to chase him, but Asher stopped him. Something felt wrong. Moments later, screams erupted from the same direction. The man's severed head was hurled back, landing before them. A towering figure emerged from the darkness. Soldiers wondered if it was an orc, but Asher corrected them. It wasn't ordinary. He explained that not only were there several of its kind nearby, but this one was an evolved leader. Its enormous size, grotesque smile-like mouth, and aura of power made it unlike anything they had seen. The red orc leader bellowed, commanding goblins and orcs forward. Enoch shouted orders to focus on the goblins first and keep defensive formation. The orc leader swung its massive blade. Enoch blocked, but the impact hurled him back. As it charged to finish him, Perrick and Harris intercepted, staggering the monster. Enoch seized the chance and drove his sword deep into the creature's chest, sliding it downward as blood gushed. The beast roared in pain. Then, horrifyingly, it seized a goblin in its grip, bit into it, and devoured it whole. Before their eyes, its wounds healed. The soldiers recoiled in disgust. Watching the regenerating beast, Enoch muttered grimly that their victory would not come with peace of mind. The orc leader threw its sword. Harris blocked, but his blade wasn't strong enough and shattered. The broken shards cut into him, and blood splashed. Perrick worried for Harris, but before he could act, the orc closed in. Perrick swung with his aura-covered sword, yet it failed to cut through. The blade got stuck in the orc's tough skin. Just as the orc was about to strike Perrick, Asher used an Earthsharer spell and forced the monster back. He called Perrick to his side. With a desperate face, Perrick cried that he couldn't retrieve his sword. Asher explained that the orc's recovery speed and physical durability had increased after it devoured the goblin earlier. Perrick said it was a full-powered strike meant to sever its arm, yet it had no effect. He had never heard of such an orc and wondered if it could be a legendary entity. Asher replied it was not. Perrick asked again, how could something this strong not be one? Asher explained further, the creature regenerated by consumption, commanded those beneath it, induced lunacy, and even had the strength to overwhelm knights. It was different from an ordinary orc, but still too weak to be called a special entity. He added that normal magic had limits beyond a certain point. The spell collapsed. But there was one spell without such limits: geography manipulation. Asher focused magic between his hands, conjuring a massive circle. Winds roared. The land shook violently. Soldiers panicked, shouting that earthquakes had come along with monsters, and cried that they would all die. Their commander tried to calm them, reminding them this was Asher's magic, though even he was shocked at the sight. The land sank in all directions, leaving only a raised pillar beneath the soldiers. Monsters, along with the orc leader, fell into the crevice. Asher followed with a huge third-tier spell, Flame Ball. It struck, burning the monsters into ash. Perrick shouted with joy that they were burning well, urging Asher to burn them all. Enoch scolded him to keep dignity, but Perrick admitted it was satisfying to see them blown away. Asher explained that third-tier geography manipulation had no limits in expansion, but few mages used it as their main magic. The reason was its excessive mana consumption, which wasn't worth its power. He said if only he had more mana, he could have created a force beyond third tier, but the result was still below his expectations. The soldiers were stunned again. The orc leader was still alive. It regenerated by eating its own kind. Perrick panicked, asking what to do. Asher decided that if it couldn't be burned, it would be frozen. He unleashed a wave spell, then multi-ice arrows and winter gust. The combined double casting formed bitter cold arrows, freezing goblins instantly. Asher explained that even endless regeneration meant nothing if the body froze. He finished with Frozen Orb, his glowing eyes shining as the leader orc was frozen completely. The conquest was done. Elsewhere, in the magic city of Verente, people discussed the latest news. One said the magic tower was sealed off and that even the energy source had exploded. Another doubted it, saying the destruction was too large to be explained that way. He added that many mages had disappeared and the major towers had stopped functioning. Some called it divine punishment, others a man-made disaster. Rumors spread that the Bohemian Magic Tower had been attacked for conducting secret experiments because there was no way it would ever seal itself. Just then, a robed figure grabbed him by the collar and demanded he repeat himself. It was Rovellan. She asked what had happened to the Bohemian Magic Tower. After the bandit subjugation, celebrations began in Pythe territory. Lord Pythe held a banquet to honor the victory. The Baron, already tipsy from wine, praised the soldiers, calling it a miracle that no one had died. Noticing Asher's late arrival, he welcomed him warmly, offering wine. Asher was surprised that even ordinary soldiers were invited, but the Baron insisted that status meant nothing when everyone had defended the territory together. Their talk soon shifted to the bandits. The Baron pointed out how unusually strong they had been. Asher agreed, saying their skills were far above typical raiders. The Baron then revealed the truth. According to investigations, the bandits were once gold rank adventurers, a rank achieved only after countless accomplishments. One of them had killed a companion and fled, eventually forming a bandit group. Their strength explained why they carried such a massive bounty of 10 million elk. Hearing this, Asher realized the battle could have ended in disaster if not for his intervention. The Baron, however, smiled proudly at him. He praised Asher for not only defeating the bandits, but also handling the demi-humans in place of fallen adventurers. Even the Adventurers Guild had sent its thanks, declaring Asher the pride of Pythe territory. Embarrassed, Asher tried to downplay his role, but the Baron raised his glass, declaring him the savior of the land. The hall erupted in cheers. The warmth of the celebration was unlike the cold, oppressive air of the Bohemian Magic Tower. Here, people laughed freely, and for the first time since his escape, Verdan felt genuine joy in his heart. But while the banquet was filled with life, none realized the storm that the collapse of the Bohemian Tower would soon bring. Far away, Rovellan investigated the tower herself. Seeing it intact, she sighed in relief, thinking the rumors had been exaggerated. But when she asked about Verdan, she was led to the Board of Missing Persons. There, she found his name. Shock and grief struck her as she remembered their last conversation. Tears fell as she realized this might have been their final farewell. He was like family to her, a dear friend she couldn't accept losing. She screamed in anguish. At that moment, the Tower Master approached. Placing his hand on her head, he told her that anger would not change the past. When she asked what happened, he explained, during the Magic Festival, while high-ranking mages were absent, the power source spiraled out of control. The core mages and duty officers were obliterated. Years of research, treasures, and records had been destroyed beyond recovery. But in his mind, he lamented the greatest loss. Experimental subject, no, 77. Verdan. If only the brain had been recovered, the tower's lost knowledge might have been restored. Outwardly, he revealed a clue. Before the surge, someone had vanished. Following the trail, the tower discovered a red triangular pendant marked with an eye. Rovellan recognized it instantly. It was the symbol of the Black Hour, a secretive group that didn't merely study magic, but sought to dominate the world through it. The Master explained that the group had infiltrated the tower, triggering the catastrophe. To honor the dead, he planned to form an extermination squad, and a place in it was reserved for Rovellan. Furious, she crushed the pendant in her hand, silently pledging vengeance. Days later, in Pythe Territory's Adventurers Guild, Asher was summoned. The guild representative apologized for their failure, admitting that they had misclassified the threat. He handed Asher a certificate of reward. Asher calculated the bounty, 24 million elk reduced to 12 million after taxes. The representative explained that unaffiliated individuals faced a flat 50% tax, but there was one legal way to avoid it: become an adventurer. He enthusiastically offered Asher the chance to join at silver rank, skipping lower levels entirely. But Asher declined. Though the money was tempting, he knew joining would restrict his future freedom. Quietly, he thought to himself, what matters more than wealth is strength. Strength to take my revenge. Even though he had lived as a test subject in the Bohemian Magic Tower for 7 years, Asher's instincts still remained those of a mage. Inside the guild's storage, he stood before the slain orc's corpse. He thought that a mage was always a seeker of mysteries and a researcher. That was why he had brought the corpse of the variant he defeated to conduct a full-scale study. He also noted the artifact the guild possessed, one that preserved a corpse's state. For Pythe's Adventurers Guild, such capabilities were nothing unusual. But when the cloth was lifted, a foul odor spread. Asher observed that the condition was far from ideal. The red pupils and skin were already striking, but the torn mouth and larger body were even more unusual. However, its features did not match higher-level species like orc warriors or lords, and its intelligence was nothing exceptional either. His conclusion, it was a mutation, not an evolution. Yet, something still felt off. Even for a mutation, there was no sufficient explanation for its regeneration or monstrous strength. Then he noticed the scar on its head. He thought carefully, regeneration restores a body to its original state. This orc's regeneration was powerful enough to heal burned flesh and torn wounds, yet it had failed to erase one small scar. That could only mean one thing: the regenerative ability was acquired after the scar was made. This was the mark of an incision, proof that a demi-human had implanted power post-birth. Until now, such changes were only possible through evolution. The most likely conclusion was horrifying. This variant had been artificially created. And that was the worst-case scenario. Later, Asher met with Enoch and Peric, who had come to see him off. He told them they didn't have to go out of their way. Peric replied that it was the least he could do for the man who saved his life. Asher said he already felt he had received too much from them, but Enoch reminded him that the gifts were his rightful reward. It turned out they had given Asher a ring of circulation and a beast-hide robe, both of which increased mana and mana recovery speed. Asher expressed gratitude for their kindness, then bid them farewell, asking them to stay healthy until they met again. Not long after, Asher arrived at the border village between Pyth territory and Martez barony. Casting Flight Dispel, he landed on the ground and looked at his map. He thought this was the only village between the city and the barony. If he rested here for one night and left the next day, the timing would be perfect. Buying an apple? He was about to take a bite when he overheard two men talking nearby. He thought it might be useful information and cast Whisper of the Wind to listen. One man complained that goblins had taken all their livestock, forcing them to pay heavily to hire adventurers. The other said that if anyone had been hurt, the cost wouldn't matter. Fees weren't cheap anyway. Asher reflected, goblins were pests to commoners. They began with petty theft, but in numbers, they raided villages, stole goods, and even ate humans. The usual response was to summon adventurers. Nothing unusual there. But then the men lowered their voices. One mentioned a rumor about James, a villager. The other tried to hush him, saying the chief had ordered silence. But the first insisted no one was listening. The story was this. A few days earlier, James had gone into the forest to check his trap. He heard the squealing of a wild boar, but when he turned, what he saw wasn't a boar, it was a goblin with a torn mouth, larger than an orc, devouring it. The listener was shocked. Bigger than an orc? Was that even possible? The storyteller warned him to stay quiet, or the adventurers would panic. Hearing this, Asher canceled his spell and smirked. A goblin with a torn mouth, larger than an orc? That could not be dismissed as coincidence. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, 4 silver rank adventurers were hunting goblins: Myrna, Loke, Iris, and Mild. Myrna and Loke argued noisily. Loke mocked her for bragging about such an easy hunt, while Myrna shot back sarcastically. Their quarrel earned sighs from the other two. Iris, calm and composed, asked Mild if he had found any signs of goblins. He pointed to a cave ahead. Its entrance was marked with totems of human and animal skulls. Iris explained that these were the symbols of higher goblin species, hobgoblins. She warned that the cave terrain could be dangerous, but the threat itself should be manageable. She ordered the others to first destroy the warning devices and totems before entering. She then cast Imbue Sight. A green magic circle shone on her hand, and suddenly her companions could see clearly in the dark. Myrna was amazed, while Loke praised Iris for her leadership. Together, the 4 ventured into the cave, but just before stepping inside, Iris stopped. Myrna asked what was wrong. Iris shook her head and said it was nothing. Yet deep down, she had felt it, a faint trace of mana brushing against her senses. Inside, the cave was huge, with pillars hanging down from the ceiling. A faint light was glowing from within. The goblins had made a totem of human skulls with fire burning beneath it, and they were bowing and worshiping it with devotion. Just then, while the goblins were distracted, Myrna released an arrow that pierced the head of one of them. Immediately, the other party members rushed forward and decapitated the remaining goblins. Myrna let out a sigh of relief, remarking that things seemed to be going smoothly and that it looked like the mission would be over quickly. Iris, however, cautioned her not to let her guard down, reminding her that it was not over yet. The party then began to move ahead cautiously, forming a careful formation. Standing at the entrance of a passage, Myrna suggested that the threat ahead could be a hobgoblin and volunteered to scout ahead. Iris agreed, but warned her to be careful and instructed her to send a signal if anything happened. Deeper inside the cave, the group found many goblins slaughtered, with their limbs and bodies torn apart. The grisly sight terrified Myrna. Loke, noticing her unease, asked what was wrong. Myrna admitted that she had just heard something which sent shivers down her spine. Inside, they saw a colossal goblin feeding on its own kind, devouring smaller goblins. Witnessing the scene left the party terrified, though they maintained a defensive formation. Iris thought to herself that a giant goblin eating its own kind was highly unusual. She wondered if it was a mutated variant, but she recalled that there had been nothing about such a creature in the mission description. Pushing aside her doubts, she focused on the immediate task, reasoning that if size was its only attribute, then they could still manage to bring it down. Iris quickly issued orders. She instructed Myrna to take out the goblin's right eye, Mild and Loke to stall for time, and declared that she herself would finish it off. Myrna stretched her bow and prepared to attack. The goblin, distracted while feeding, did not notice her. She released the arrow, which struck its right eye. Blood gushed out, and the monster squealed in pain. Loke immediately shouted for Mild to raise his shield. Using the shield as a platform, he propelled himself forward with bursting speed and lunged at the goblin, managing to wound it. But just as Loke thought he had succeeded, the goblin stretched out its arm to attack him, leaving him little room to escape. At that critical moment, Myrna unleashed a mana burst spell. Green energy shot forth, blasting into the goblin and causing it to lose its balance. The creature screamed in pain. In retaliation, the goblin grabbed a corpse from the ground and hurled it at tremendous speed toward Iris. The party members shouted at her to get down, but she was stunned by the velocity and unable to react. At the last moment, however, the projectile changed its trajectory. Asher, concealed in the shadows, had secretly used his air rail spell. The corpse crashed against the wall, blood splattering everywhere. Witnessing the intensity of the attack, Iris was shocked and fell to her knees. In the meantime, Myrna released another arrow which struck the goblin, causing it to collapse to the ground. The party rushed to Iris. Myrna anxiously asked if she was hurt. Iris reassured her that she was fine, though in her thoughts she admitted that if the goblin's attack had struck her directly, she would have been dead. She was unsettled, however, because the trajectory had clearly shifted midair, leaving her to wonder what had caused it. Myrna, relieved, remarked that it was a blessing they had completed the mission without anyone getting hurt, and suggested they hurry back to the village for their reward. Hidden from sight, Asher reflected that he was glad nothing worse had happened. He acknowledged that it was fortunate he had followed them while cloaked in invisibility, for it allowed him to observe one of the lab's specimens, the so-called jester demi-human. Every test subject he had encountered since escaping the magic tower shared the same trait: a mouth torn into a jester-like smile. Because of this, he had started referring to them informally as jesters. But this goblin seemed different. Unlike the other variants, it lacked enhanced physical strength and showed no sign of regeneration or growing stronger by consuming its own kind. He speculated whether it was simply a large goblin or perhaps a failed experiment. He also noted that the mage, Iris, had sharp judgment and was highly sensitive to mana. It had not been a coincidence when she sensed his presence outside the cave earlier. Iris, still cautious, insisted they confirm whether any goblins remained. She instructed Myrna to keep watch around the area and told Loke and Mild to investigate the other paths. Listening to this, Asher sighed to himself, lamenting that in the end, there would be no harvest for him. Just then, a strange man appeared, smiling wickedly as he observed them. He mockingly remarked that someone had arrived while he was away. The party instantly took a defensive stance. Iris, wary, told him that he did not look like an adventurer and demanded that he state his identity, warning that if he came any closer, she would attack. Grinning, the man introduced himself as the caretaker of the place. He explained that the goblin den, which they had just destroyed, was supposed to have restricted activity in this area. But while he was away, the goblins had even built a totem. He complained that even manipulating their brains had not been enough to suppress their instincts. He then asked if they had noticed anything strange about the goblin or observed any unusual behavior. When the party remained silent, he sighed and concluded that it must have been just a regular one. He worried aloud that if the professor found out, there would be consequences, but shrugged, saying what was done was done. He decided the best place to start was by fixing what he could, which meant eliminating them. Hearing this, the party held their weapons firmly and readied themselves. Iris demanded to know if he truly intended to fight all of them by himself. The strange man confirmed that he did, explaining that because of them, the specimen was dead and their ongoing experiment had been compromised. Even if it hadn't been, he could not risk them spreading word of this place. Iris countered that if they promised to keep his secret, there would be no need to fight. The man, unsheathing his sword, laughed and asked what guarantee they could give that they would keep it. Even if they could, he admitted he had no intention of letting them leave alive. With a grin, he began to charge his energy, confessing that he simply wanted to hear them scream. He taunted them further, asking who wanted to die first. The sight of his twisted eagerness made the party visibly tense. Just as he was threatening them, a voice came from behind, cold and sharp, declaring that the only one who would die here was him. It was Asher's voice. Moving with elegance, Asher sprinted along the walls and descended upon the man with an attack that sent him crashing into the stone. Asher rebuked him, pointing out that his words about wanting to hear screams and asking who wanted to die first were nothing more than empty bravado. The man, bleeding from the strike, stood back up with a grin. Asher, meanwhile, began charging his energy. A blue magic circle appeared, spiraling as power gathered in his hand. Asher thought to himself that he did not particularly intend to intervene, but if he had not stepped in, the party behind him would have been completely annihilated by that man. Looking at the slain goblin, he reflected that the man had referred to the goblin as a test subject and had mentioned someone behind the scenes called the Professor. There was no doubt he realized that this was related to the jester demi-humans. Grinning in pain, the man asked Asher who he was. Asher replied that he did not believe he had any obligation to answer that question. Preparing for attack, the man said that it did not matter and that even if Asher did not reveal his identity, it would not change the fact that he would die by the man's hand. With this, the man lunged at high speed towards Asher to attack. In retaliation, Asher charged his own attack and a red-crimson magic circle formed. The man paced forward in a zigzag manner, energy radiating as his eyes glowed with purple light. He attacked Asher, but his strike was blocked by a shield Asher had conjured. The barrier cracked, but Asher quickly used another spell called Mana Pulse. The attack pushed the man backward, though he managed to land on his feet a few meters away. Asher thought that the man's speed was vastly superior to the party's. He had initially believed he could finish the battle in one strike, but now realized he would have to change his combat strategy. The man then taunted Asher, saying that he was quite fast at deploying magic. He admitted he did not know Asher's rank, but declared that, in that case, he would increase his own speed to see how Asher handled it. With that, the man dashed forward at tremendous speed towards him. Asher, raising his hand, cast the spell. Winter Gale, followed immediately by Icicle. It was double casting. Blue energy radiated from the magic circle he formed. Seeing this, the man was shocked and thought to himself that the simultaneous use of ice and wind elements was astonishing. The combined spell became Icicle Blast. The room was filled with blue energy as numerous ice shards were propelled towards the man. Dodging Asher's attack, the man remarked that double casting with dual elements was impressive, but if the attack missed, it was meaningless. Smiling evilly, he dodged all of Asher's strikes and then leapt forward to attack. Asher, fully aware, waited for the perfect timing to dodge. At the final moment, he moved aside, evading the man's strike, which visibly startled him. The man thought to himself in disbelief that a mere mage had managed to dodge his attack. Iris, equally shocked at Asher's combat prowess and speed, wondered how a mage had been able to react at that level. Asher then swiftly cast the spell Ignition. A huge blast followed. The entire cave was lit with crimson energy, flames, dust, and amber particles. After the aftermath of the attack, it became clear that the man had managed to survive. He said that Asher had deliberately drawn him in for a counterattack, which was not a typical mage tactic, but he warned that such a trick would no longer work on him. Asher replied that traps would not work on the man anymore either, so from now on, he would fight like a proper mage. He then used a magic spell to lift the floor on which the party was standing, raising it into a towering pillar. The party was visibly startled. Lok asked in shock what was happening, wondering why the ground was shifting all of a sudden. Mild questioned how high the pillar was rising. After some time, the pillar stopped growing. Looking down below, Iris exclaimed that this was terrain manipulation. She noted that the spell was notoriously inefficient in mana usage, yet Asher was using it in actual combat. Looking at him, she further realized that double casting and rapid-fire large-scale spells indicated his mana reserve must be immense. She admitted she had never heard of such a combat style before. Asher then used a flight spell. His eyes glowed, and his whole body pulsated with blue energy. Looking up at Asher, the man grinned and remarked that Asher had said he would fight like a mage, but had simply run away into the air. He questioned whether Asher thought he would be helpless just because he was grounded. But then the man had a realization. He thought that while Asher had indeed moved into the air, there had to be a reason he had raised all the adventurers along with him, despite the extreme mana consumption. Looking at his own feet, he realized that the flames from earlier had melted the ice shards. Before the man could react further, Asher launched a lightning spell. A huge surge of electrical energy collapsed on the man, and before he could react, he was struck by it. Iris, shocked at the scene, thought that even among the Academy's professors, only a few could use that element. The attack was revealed to be rank 3 magic, Thunderstrike. The man, wreathed in pain and unable to tolerate it, thought to himself in horror, wondering who this Asher really was. Fire, ice, wind, and now even the advanced element of lightning, he was bewildered. Asher escalated the assault with triple casting, using fire, earth, and water spells. A huge explosion followed, the blast pressure forcing every party member to crouch down. In the aftermath of the explosion, when the dust settled, the man was brutally wounded and barely standing. Asher descended and asked the man one thing. There had been an orc in the Pythe Barony similar to that goblin earlier. Were they all somehow related to this professor? Trembling with pain, the man replied that it explained why it had been so quiet over there. Asher was the one behind it. Grinning with malice, the man then asked if Asher had come from the Ark. Asher widened his eyes at the question. The man observed that it seemed to be Asher's first time hearing of it. He assured him it was fine not to know, but told him to kill him anyway. Asher replied that before doing so, he wanted the man to answer where the professor was. The man countered by asking why Asher wanted to know. Asher answered that he was interested in the experiments they were conducting. The man thought to himself that it would be dangerous to allow Asher to reach the professor. He then appeared to agree, saying that the professor was Fakin. But before finishing, he suddenly threw a dart from his mouth, intending to die together with Asher. The sharp projectile shot towards Asher, but was promptly blocked by a shield. Asher looked coldly at the man and said that this was his answer, and he had heard it loud and clear. He then used Earth Shatter to kill the man. Undoing the terrain manipulation, Asher brought the party back to the floor. He thought to himself that he had believed he had finally gotten a clue about the jesters, but in the end, his efforts had been in vain. It did not matter. He concluded he needed to finish what needed to be done first. Asher then shot a cold glare towards the party and commanded that from now on, they would all have to follow his orders. The party members were terrified at this sight. After some time, Iris mentioned in a hesitant tone that, as he had ordered, she had received additional compensation from the village chief. Saying this, Iris handed Asher a bag of compensation money. She explained that when she threatened to report the omitted information about the mutated goblin, the chief had paid an additional 1.2 million elk to keep her silent. After handing it over, Iris bid him goodbye, saying that since their business there was finished, they would now take their leave. But at that very moment, Asher stopped them, insisting that they accept something first and handed over the party's share of the money. Iris, shocked, quickly turned back. Asher then handed over the commission money as well and instructed that the party guide him from the village to the city of Martes. Asher reflected that after the incident in the cave, he had started heading toward Martes with Iris's party. Along the way, the party leader Iris had relentlessly questioned him about magic, more specifically about the theory of elements in magic. And before he realized it, they had already arrived in Martes. Upon arriving, Asher asked if a city of this size would likely have a bank. Loke responded that since they had several reports to file with the Adventurers Guild, they would go in a different direction, and their leader would take charge of guiding Asher around Martes. Iris then inquired where he would like to go first. Asher replied that he wished to begin by settling the bounty and opening a bank account. To this, Iris responded that in that case, they should head to the city hall first. With enthusiasm, she moved ahead, declaring that she knew the layout of Martes like the back of her hand. Seeing such energy from their leader, the party members were baffled in a lighthearted way. Mild remarked that their leader did not seem fazed at all, while Myrna added that he was the same person who had killed the man they met in the cave without a moment's hesitation. First of all, bounty rewards were administered through the city hall. Both Asher and Iris parted from the others and made their way to the Martes City Hall. Asher contemplated that he had nearly run into trouble since he had not yet created an ID after changing his body. Fortunately, through Baron Pythe's guarantee, he was allowed entry. Moreover, upon learning that Asher had brought a letter of endorsement from Baron Pythe, the mayor whose family lived in Baron Pythe's territory expressed gratitude for defeating the bandits. Unexpectedly, he even gifted Asher an official ID. Thanks to this, Asher was able to open a bank account, which worked out well. He still had the account he had used back in Verente, but if he were to use that one, the Tower Master might trace it back to him, so he could not afford to be careless. After this, Asher and Iris went to a blacksmith to have his wand fashioned into a staff. Asher requested that the blacksmith refashion it. The blacksmith replied that for such work, he would need materials and some time, asking Asher to return in 3 days. He then handed Asher another staff to use in the meantime. Seeing this, Iris questioned whether Asher preferred staffs over wands. Asher replied that he had simply grown accustomed to using them from sweeping with brooms so often. Hearing this, Iris was astonished. Asher then suggested that they move on to the next location, and they decided to head to the public library. Upon arriving at the Martes library, Asher asked whether they had books on enchantment magic. Iris replied that they should, though perhaps not at a level that would satisfy him. Asher assured her that basic ones would suffice. Iris then asked how many he would like, to which Asher responded that he wanted all of them. Inside the library, a huge stack of books was taken out for him. Iris struggled to balance them while the librarian smiled awkwardly. Handing over his card for payment, Asher instructed that the rental fees be charged to his account and that the books be delivered to the top floor of the Lorix Hotel. The librarian then asked how many books he wanted delivered, to which Asher once again replied that he wanted all of them. Both Iris and the librarian were baffled, and the librarian remarked that this was the biggest sale ever. As he read books in the library, Asher thought to himself that he had received his bounty rewards, opened a bank account, commissioned a staff, and borrowed every book on enchantment. At this point, Iris said she was tired. Looking at Asher, she wondered who exactly this man was. She then asked if she had taken him everywhere he wanted to go that day. While continuing to read, Asher replied that it was more than enough for the day. Iris then remembered that she had never asked his name and inquired what she should call him. Asher introduced himself as Asher, but added that she could call him whatever was easiest. Iris then said that she would call him Asher and requested that he speak casually with her as well. Asher thought that she had gotten comfortable quickly. Iris, in turn, thought that it was now her chance to ask something she had been dying to know. She cautiously asked why he had been in that cave, assuring him that she was not trying to interrogate him. Hiding his face, Asher wondered what he should say. Flustered, he thought that he could not exactly admit he had saved them by coincidence. Saying that he just happened to be there would sound strange, so he decided to give a vague excuse. He replied casually that he had been chasing that man. Iris immediately connected the dots and realized that he was referring to the man they had encountered earlier. She recalled how that man had asked about the professor back in the cave and began to wonder if Asher was some kind of secret agent chasing a shadow organization. Closing the book, Asher remarked that he had not gained much from it in the end, but that the day had been more than enough so she could go back now. Iris insisted on escorting him since he was new to the city. Asher replied that there was no need for her to go that far, but agreed nonetheless. The day finally ended, and Asher and Iris parted ways. Waving her hand, Iris wished him a good night and said that she would see him tomorrow. Afterward, she sighed in relief and admitted to herself that they were finally done. Exhausted, she lay on a bench at the side of the road and remarked that he really was a strange man. She thought about how he possessed such a high level of magic that he could wield all the elemental attributes with a depth of mana she could not even measure. Not only that, but at such a young age, he had a better theoretical grasp than most academy professors, and he even taught well. To top it all off, with his handsome face, he must be incredibly popular. But when actually speaking to him, he was oddly stiff, almost like talking to a scarecrow. Or perhaps, she thought, he was simply coasting on his looks. Blushing, she raised her hand and muttered in frustration, wondering why his face kept popping into her head. She then admitted that even so, among all the mages she had met since graduating from the academy and becoming an adventurer, he was definitely the most skilled. Clenching her fist in determination, she resolved that such talent was rare to come across, and tomorrow she would ask him even more about elemental magic. But just as she stood up to go her way, a huge explosion erupted behind her. She looked back in shock and muttered in disbelief, realizing that it was the Lorix Hotel. The explosion had obliterated the upper part of the hotel, and the roof was engulfed in flames. Iris froze in horror, remembering that Asher had said he was staying there. She then noticed a human-shaped silhouette floating in the air amidst the flames. Her terrified eyes focused on it. It was Asher. A few moments earlier, in another place, a mysterious man wearing a hooded cloak informed a man engrossed in experiments that Surgeon was dead. The man with glasses immediately asked who had killed him. The hooded figure explained that traces of offensive magic had been detected inside the cave, so Surgeon must have been murdered by someone else. However, before he could finish his sentence, the man in glasses hurled a glass container filled with chemicals. It shattered against the hooded man's head, spilling the corrosive contents all over him. Furious, the man in glasses demanded that he stop playing dumb and answer who had killed Surgeon. The hooded figure admitted that the perpetrator had not yet been confirmed, but investigations showed that a party had accepted a request from the nearby village. Disappointed, the man in glasses remarked that Surgeon had been a useful asset. He then asked if the test subject was dead as well. The cloaked man replied that both Surgeon's remains and those of the test subject had been completely erased. With cold irritation, the man in glasses said that the assassin should also have been eliminated, calling the hooded figure a useless piece of trash. Inwardly, he reflected that the two test subjects from the Pyth Barony had gone silent, and now both the goblin and Surgeon were dead as well. Placing a hand on his chin in thought, he speculated aloud that the experiment was nearing completion and wondered whether the Ark faction had already caught on to them. He ordered the hooded man not to return until he had killed the one responsible. The cloaked figure acknowledged the command without protest. Later, at Lorix Hotel, the hooded man concealed himself in order to ambush Asher. Cursing to himself, he thought that the stubborn old master had forced his hand, and he resolved to return with the head of the perpetrator no matter what. Just then, Asher returned to his room, absorbed in reading about enchanting magic. He activated a basic spell, Cat Ear, and muttered to himself, wondering if that was the correct way to perform it. Watching from the shadows, the hidden man noted that Asher had been wandering about all day and thought impatiently that once the boy lay down to sleep, that moment would mark his end. But suddenly, the assassin realized something was wrong. He grew tense, wondering why it was so quiet. At that instant, Asher activated the Earthbone spell. Terrified, the man cursed under his breath as he narrowly evaded the sudden attack. Shock rippled through him as he realized that he had been detected despite remaining in stealth. The next moment, Lorix Hotel was plunged into flames. Asher rose into the air, surrounded by fire that radiated around his glowing form. The assassin managed to escape, blending into the panicked crowd. Looking back at Asher, he was shaken. He thought that the boy had gone straight to blasting, without hesitation, and worse, had used explosive magic in such a confined space. Concluding that Asher was at least a third-tier mage, he decided to retreat. Trying to cover his escape, the man shouted to the people that a terrifying mage had begun a terrorist attack and urged them to flee at once and report to the guards. From above, Asher surveyed the chaos below. He realized that the assassin, by erasing his presence completely, had made himself more conspicuous, like a pitch-black hole against a blank page. With his eyes glowing, Asher pinpointed the man's location and fired a long-range projectile. The assassin barely managed to dodge. Startled, the man thought that he had erased his presence completely, so how could Asher possibly have sensed him? In shock, he cried out in disbelief, wondering what kind of monster the Ark had sent, and cursed Asher for attacking so recklessly among civilians. In response, Asher conjured a huge blue magic circle and launched magic arrows at the fleeing man. Though the assassin managed to jump aside and dodge them, he darted into a basement to hide. Asher observed that of all places, the man had chosen a building that served as a hideout for vagrants. When Asher entered, several thugs inside glared at him. One of them complained that he was barging in and causing trouble without reason. Asher apologized and asked where the man who had just entered had gone. Smirking, the thug told him that if he wanted information, he would have to pay for it. Asher sighed, concluding that since there was no obvious escape route, the assassin must still be inside. But before he could act, the cloaked man suddenly drove his sword through the thug's chest, ensuring the blade struck both the thug and Asher. Asher realized in shock that the assassin had attacked directly through the vagrant, using such a cowardly move. In response, he unleashed Shockwave, sending a huge pulse of energy outward that hurled the man away. The assassin, however, managed to regain his balance by plunging his sword into the floor to redirect his momentum. The man reasoned that mages generally could not attack and defend at the same time. If that was true, then by baiting Asher into casting a barrier, he could use a smoke bomb to escape. With blinding speed, he lunged at Asher, shouting for him to cast his magic barrier. But Asher, watching carefully, instead invoked the Earthbone spell. The assassin was caught off guard, realizing that instead of raising a shield, Asher was channeling mana into the tip of his staff. Shock struck him as he wondered if the boy was, in fact, a war mage, capable of holding his own even in close combat. In the next instant, Asher gathered energy at the tip of his staff and struck the man squarely in the stomach. Blood spewed from the assassin's mouth as his face twisted in pain. Asher prepared to charge the Earthbone spell again, but the cloaked figure quickly activated a smoke bomb, disappearing from sight. Asher cleared the haze with a whirlwind spell, but the man had already fled. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Asher was suddenly interrupted by a sharp voice from behind him, warning him not to move. Turning, he found the city guards had arrived. Their commander declared that Asher was under arrest for arson and acts of terror within the city.